Hello everyone, it's NerdGasm. In my last comic review, I discussed the death of Superman, one of the most controversial and significant stories in comic book history, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective of course. We looked at the Man of Steel's hard-hitting confrontation with the villain Doomsday, the moment he died within Lois Lane's arms, in front of the Daily Planet building, and of course, his emotional funeral and memorial service, attended by a great number of heroes and some villains found within the DC universe. But today, I will be continuing my retrospective of this storyline, discussing the last half of it, depicting the eventual return and revival of Superman. Now, following his death in Superman Volume 2, number 75, and the immediate aftermath, seen in the Funeral for a Friend story arc, DC Comics would cease publication of all Superman titles for a bit, really let the death of their tentpole hero linger in the minds of their readers, play with expectations, make sure enough time had passed before they would decide to dig him back up again, and guarantee that the story we would get, whenever that was going to be polished and satisfying, because they would have given themselves way more than enough time to iron a narrative like that out. How long was this, you say? What was the magic number? Oh, about 3 months. Yeah, 3 months doesn't sound like enough time, does it? Seems a bit rushed, given the scope of what we're dealing with here. The death of arguably the greatest superhero to ever exist, Superman. His revival needed to be just as strong, if not stronger, than his death was. And the question is, did it end up becoming that? Well, let's find out, shall we? Following the death of Superman, crime and violence is at an all-time high in Metropolis. There is a massive power vacuum in the city, now that Big Blue is out of the picture. Several heroes emerge from the tragedy to fill the void, either claiming themselves to be Superman, or else simply making an attempt to continue his legacy. They each are given one of Superman's iconic monikers he has had throughout the years. You have Superboy, the Metropolis Kid, the teenage clone of Superman, created by Project Cadmus after they had temporarily stolen Kal-el's body from his tomb. I mentioned it in my previous review. Superboy manages to escape from the Project Cadmus facility, and his reckless, stubborn, rebellious, and arrogant behavior, his teen angst, is due to the fact that certain code words had never been implanted into him before he got out. Superboy would become sponsored by the WGBS News Network and be sent to stop crimes they had orchestrated behind the scenes to boost ratings, putting innocent lives at risk in the process. They take advantage of Superboy's youth and naivety for their own gain, but he does learn to put others before himself and stop acting like a complete douchebag. As the story progresses, he redeems himself in a lot of big ways and earns the name of Superman. Then there's the Man of Steel, or simply just Steel, an iron worker and ex-weapons designer for the military, named John Henry Irons, who is caught in the middle of a gang war in Metropolis. He learns that a weapon of his own creation, called the BG-80, is out on the streets in high numbers, and makes it his personal mission to get rid of them and undo all the damage they have caused. Superman had saved him at one point, and Irons believes that he owes the late hero his life. He wants to make his count mean something. The comic refers to Steel as the walk-in spirit of Superman, because out of all of these supermen, these imposters, he's the only one that has the heart and soul of the original, and in many ways, he's the heart and soul of this comic as well, at least when Superman is absent from it. The third imposter Superman is the Eradicator, or as the comic frequently refers to him as, the last son of Krypton. He is an energy-powered alien who claims to have the memories of the original Superman. He wears a visor because he is sensitive to the sunlight and views good and evil as black and white. There is no in-between. This makes his form of justice far more brutal and merciless than the original Superman's. Eradicator is shown knocking criminals through walls, burning them with his heat vision, and even breaking the fingers, hands, and forearms of a safecracker, hospitalizing him, and nearly forcing the doctors to amputate both his arms. The final Superman is the cyborg Superman, who claims to be the one true Man of Steel, augmented with Kryptonian technology that he can command like living metal. He tells the world that his freakish appearance is the result of the severe damage his body had sustained during his fight with Doomsday. He also has amnesia due to these new mechanical pieces. Tests are done on him by Professor Hamilton at Star Labs, and his DNA is a match to that of the original Superman's. Even the President of the United States deems him the real Superman after he is saved from an assassination attempt at the White House. These four Supermen slowly learn of each other's existence as the story goes along, and naturally they find themselves at odds with one another, mainly because their personal motivations and morals don't line up with each other's, but also because they feel only one of them has the right to be Superman. They get so caught up in their own egos that they end up dishonoring Superman's name and legacy with all of their fighting. Lois Lane is still not over the death of her friend, lover, and fiancé, and has to deal with the loss of two people at the same time essentially, Clark Kent and Superman. Only she and Clark's adoptive parents, Jonathan and Martha, know that the two were one and the same, and she has to keep that secret from the world. She has been investigating the disappearance of Superman's body that had been stolen at the end of the first half of this story, and once the other four imposter Supermen appear, she chases the story of his return, in the hopes that one of them truly is the Man of Steel, because Lois, in many ways, is still in denial over his death. When the real Superman does eventually pop back up, she's reluctant to accept it, believing he's just another one of the imposters. Having all of these Supermen flying around, all of them claiming to be the man she loved, the man she held in her arms as he died, it fucks with her emotions, confuses her. She almost breaks down numerous times, and I don't blame her. She is unable to conquer her grief and sadness because the death of Superman is constantly being shoved in her face every direction she turns, and she is basically being taunted and teased by his possible survival through the media as well, which obviously doesn't help. As the narrative continues, the alien tyrant named Mongol arrives on Earth and destroys Coast City, California, using a series of sphere-shaped bombs. He completely levels it with these explosives and wipes out all 7 million inhabitants there in order to erect an engine city, the first of many, that will allow him to transform the Earth into a mobile planet called Warworld that Mongol will rule over. Cyborg Superman is then revealed to be the true mastermind behind Coast City's destruction when he and Eradicator arrive at Engine City to put a stop to it, only for Cyborg Superman to blame the Eradicator for bringing the alien ship to Earth and seemingly killing him in retaliation. In actuality, Cyborg Superman had partnered with Mongol, despite a rocky relationship between the two, in order to not only destroy Coast City, but also Metropolis as well, in the hopes of turning it into the second Engine City site. Cyborg Superman had been a crew member of the LexCorp space shuttle Excalibur, named Hank Henshaw. He and his crew had been exposed to a high level of cosmic radiation, which resulted in the shuttle's crash. 2 of his crew members died instantaneously. Though Henshaw survived, his body would rapidly decay, and his wife, another one of the crew members, would be admitted into a mental hospital, where she would die sometime later. Henshaw would manage to transfer his mind into LexCorp's mainframe, and then into the birthing matrix which had carried Kal-El to Earth as a baby. He would use the ship to send his consciousness through space in search of knowledge, but would only become more deranged and delusional as his journey went on. He would grow to hate Superman, blaming him for what had happened to his crew and his wife, in his eyes, causing the radiation that led to their deaths and illnesses during a battle he had had with a Kryptonian artificial intelligence, one he had thrown into the sun. Henshaw would use the birthing matrix to create a body for himself that was genetically identical to that of the original Superman's. His ultimate goal was to conquer the Earth in the guise of his mortal enemy, to utterly destroy Superman's good reputation. Cyborg Superman is a pretty cool character. I love the visual design of him, how he manipulates the public, even members of the Justice League in this part of the story, is pretty effective and believable. He has mastered the art of transmorphing and can alter the mechanical sections of his body as if they were living pieces of metal. When the heroes enter Engine City later in the story, Henshaw has full control over it because the entire thing is a machine. They enter into his domain. At one point, he even takes control of Steel's armor and attempts to suffocate him, which is an interesting visual, to say the least. I had mentioned that Henshaw had blamed Superman for poisoning his crew with radiation after throwing a Kryptonian AI into the sun. Well, that AI was the Eradicator. It's a Kryptonian weapon created by Kal-el's ancestors to protect the integrity of Kryptonian life, and this is where Kal-el factors into this story. After the Eradicator had been wounded by Cyborg Superman at the Coast City, Engine City site, it would retreat to the Fortress of Solitude that it had been using as a base of operations. It's revealed that the Eradicator had been keeping the body of Kal-el it had stolen from Superman's tomb in the fortress's regeneration matrix, and had been feeding off it for power this whole time. The energy-based AI formed a body similar to that of Kal-el's in appearance, to act like a shield or outer shell, and made an attempt to keep the symbol of Superman alive in its own way, though again its understanding of right and wrong was severely distorted, hence all the brutality and everything I brought up earlier. Anyways, Kal-el, in his weakened state, would eventually escape the Fortress of Solitude with the help of a giant Kryptonian warsuit, strong enough to walk along the floor of the ocean. It acted as a life support system and form of defense while he was physically vulnerable, until he could reach the coast of Metropolis. Once he does, the giant purple mech essentially poops him out of its butthole. I'm assuming it's to symbolize Kal-el's rebirth, but man, is it a goofy image, one I always remember, and honestly, I can never take it seriously. Look folks, it's Pooper Man. All jokes aside, Superman's appearance here is pretty awesome. The long hair, the black suit, it's a rad look for the character. Of course, the black suit isn't just a stylistic choice, but it plays a role within the story. Being black in color, it allows Superman to absorb more of the sun's energy while he is recovering. The story also has him utilize high-tech weapons stolen from Mongol's robots to make up for his decreased strength and weakened abilities, though the comic makes it very clear that he only uses the weapons to destroy the non-living enemies, to scare away the living ones. Gotta make sure Superman doesn't kill, right? All this edginess is just superficial at the end of the day. Kal-el, Steel, and Superboy would team up to stop Cyborg Superman and Mongol at Engine City. While Steel focuses on destroying the city's engine room, Superman would take on Mongol, but is no match for him in his weakened state. Thankfully, Hal Jordan arrives, furious at Mongol for destroying his home of Coast City, and rescues Superman from the villain. If you would like more info regarding what happens to Green Lantern following this, then check out my review of Emerald Twilight I did a few months ago. Let's just say it wasn't pretty. Anyways, with Mongol now out of the picture, Superman confronts Cyborg Superman in the core of Engine City, revealed to be powered by kryptonite. Cyborg Superman attempts to hit Kal-el with a direct blast of it from a broken pipe, but Superman is saved by the Eradicator. The kryptonite energy is somehow altered by Eradicator's body, and when it passes through Superman, it heals him and fully restores his power, or whatever, because comics. It's at this point Superman is at 100% and punches a hole through Henshaw's cyborg torso. Kal-El then spins his arm at superhuman speed and shatters cyborg Superman into tiny fragments. Superman then changes back into his classic outfit, returns to Metropolis and embraces Lois Lane, and orchestrates a rescue of Clark Kent from underneath building rubble, who had been presumed dead following Superman's battle with Doomsday. This Clark Kent is revealed to be Supergirl, who at this point in the comics was a shape-shifting life form called Matrix, created by Lex Luthor. And there you have it. That is the return of Superman in a nutshell. While this story has its fair share of great moments, memorable moments, a lot of interesting characters and ideas within it, when the whole thing reaches its conclusion, when all the dust settles, it comes off as a very convoluted and contrived story, in my opinion. It feels the need to overly explain a lot of its elements, make them far more complicated than they really need to be. Superman's revival is far weaker than his death, and I think a lot of Superman fans would probably agree with me on that. I love the idea of the regeneration matrix, and the black suit of course, but some of the other concepts and how the comic goes about explaining them gets kind of messy for me. When Superman fought Doomsday and died, his body had absorbed enough sun energy to slow his death, but apparently not enough to save his life, which feels like such a silly way to word that. You might as well not even say anything at all. It would sound less confusing. The comic also discusses the notion that his survival was the result of both physical and metaphysical forces at work, a combination of forces found on Earth and on Krypton. I didn't even go into the near-death experience of Jonathan Kent, fighting for Clark's spirit on another plane of existence. There's a Kryptonian funeral service and everything. Again, this comic feels the need to overcomplicate a lot of this stuff. I get that it's Superman, I get that he's strong, and you need to explain how he could come back from death, but the energy of the sun was enough for me. He's a solar panel, essentially. The more you explain something, the more confusing and ineffective it becomes, and that is exactly what happened in this storyline. Not to mention, it also emphasizes the fact that his resurrection could never be duplicated, in case everything wasn't contrived enough. When it comes to the death and return of Superman as a whole, the first half of the story is the strongest, without question. Superman's death at the hands of Doomsday, while controversial, was exciting and emotional, and his funeral service and a memorial is the highlight of the entire storyline for me, even though the funeral for a friend section does have the most filler compared to the rest of it. I do still enjoy the latter half of this storyline, going into the reign of the Supermen, and of course the revival of Kal-El. They do have their moments, but it does feel very messy at times, having to juggle so many characters, and explain so many elements that I feel didn't need explaining. I think this half of the story would have benefited from a longer gestation period after the death of Superman, so the creators and writers could really plan out a strong follow-up and satisfying conclusion to everything. I'm not saying the latter half of this storyline is terrible, but I do think it had the potential of being so much more than it was. I mean, within the story itself, Superman is only gone for a little over 30 days, that's it. I feel so much more could have been done with this if he had been gone longer, how that would have affected his allies, his romance with Lois Lane, the world in general. I feel we only scratched the surface with a lot of it, and it's kind of disappointing. I think the writers could have trimmed a lot of the fat with this story, made a few alterations to it to condense everything, make it stronger. I feel the character of Superboy, even Eradicator to a certain extent, were a bit unnecessary. If they had focused primarily on Steel and Cyborg Superman, I think that would have worked much better. Have only two Supermans in Kal-El's absence, one that he had saved, that wanted to continue his legacy, and one that he essentially didn't save, that wanted to destroy it. The positive and negative consequences to Superman's actions, plain and simple. Again, I don't mean to shit on this storyline. I still enjoy it to a degree, but once Superman was dead and buried, you sorta knew that whatever they came up with, it wouldn't live up to the heights of his death. In that sense, I guess you could say that what they did come up with in so little time is impressive, but I'm still on the side of it being rushed and not being able to live up to its full potential. But what do you think of it? The Reign of the Supermen and Return of Superman sections of this story. Do you think they were inferior to the first half? Or do you think they exceeded expectations? I'd like to hear your thoughts. I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed my review, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.